Hello everyone, I've got a special video for you today. I'm going to be presenting a Nativity Masterclass. That's right, we got Mary, Bethlehem Stable, Star Bethlehem, that's all you need to know. Now let's get into it. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of context about what this video is. So I'm Baboony Tim. I've been learning Redemption right now for since January, so that's like maybe 5 or 6 months at this point. And I've kind of narrowed in my focus on the decks that I really want to get good at for Nationals to this Nativity archetype. And so this video is going to be focusing on Nativity in general. It's not going to be focusing on the defenses so much because, half of a deck is all about the defense. But this is just really laser focusing on the Nativity cards from Gospel of Christ and kind of the package that I feel like is the best for them. I'm going to be talking about their strengths, their weaknesses, sequencing, how you want to try and do your turn ones at a high level, and then a lot of tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. So here's kind of the core list of cards for Nativity that I believe almost every Nativity deck should want to play. I'm sure like a couple of these cards will ebb and flow as the meta changes, but we'll go over each of these cards in more detail. If you don't know what all these cards do, that's really okay too, because I'll pull up the cards on the screen and you can read them. But Nativity at a high level is a deck that's trying to use Star Bethlehem and the Resurrection to leverage an early explosive lead. It has a bunch of characters that are really strong in combat. And the idea is if you can get them all banded together and protected with cards like Flight into Egypt, you're going to have attacks that are really hard to answer for most traditional defenses. The cool thing about Nativity, it's very consistent about kind of doing its game plan of getting the Resurrection out on turn one. Has cards like Annunciation, which can territory class way to go get it out of your deck, or Angel Appears to get an Angel, which you can grab the Resurrection Revealer, and then Revealer can go to combat, and when he attacks, he can grab a Gospel Dominant from your deck. And then cards like New Covenant can go get these enhancements to go. So there's just a bunch of consistency pieces. So outside of turn one, that you're going to be getting the Resurrection to get maybe a Stable or Herod's Temple into play. You're going to be eventually getting your Mary online. Mary's good about just really attacking your opponent's territories and getting rid of their best creatures, or sorry, best heroes that they can block you with. And the cool thing about Bethlehem Stable, provides this inevitability engine. It has this clause that if your nativity hero is harmed, you can go put them straight in your reserve. And so even if they get rid of cards like Mary in combat or whatever, they're just going to be able to come back over and over and over again. I'm going to go over some of the high level concepts about Nativity, and maybe if you've played Nativity before, or if you're pretty familiar with all these cards, then maybe you can go ahead and skip this part. But I would say one of the best heroes in the deck is definitely Mary. She has this strict deck building requirement where you have to play Unity heroes in order to get her. But that's the cool thing about our deck. We're playing all these Nativity heroes that are all gospel, and so Mary is just the perfect card for the deck. When you attack with her, you can negate and reserve an evil or neutral card in a territory. So not only does this hit evil characters that are sitting in the territory, it also deals with problematic artifacts or sites. Which is, this ability by itself is a slam dunk, super, super good, especially when you pair Mary with cards like 20 shekels, where you can play cards out of their hand and directly into play, leaving them open and vulnerable for Mary. So if you pair Mary with 20 shekels, you're going to have a really strong game plan against decks that don't run that many evil characters, or are trying to play these really light defenses. And if they only have one or two evil characters in their hand, you get the best one out, attack with Mary. Their blocking options are going to be severely limited. So that's kind of like a strong concept there. John the Forerunner, to kind of go along with this attacking their territory plan, he requires unity as well, but his unity says paralyze all evil characters to strength X or greater. So imagine over the course of the game, you're using 20 shekels to play out their characters from their hand, or for whatever reason your opponent is putting down their evil characters in their territory. John can just come in, and if you have enough cards in your hand, should I say, if you have very few cards in your hand, you can just come in totally unopposed. So this guy pairs really well with your game plan of attacking their territory well too. So let's kind of talk about the Resurrection. This is a dominant. Says you can play good Gospel Fortress and Empty Tomb Hero from deck or discard pile. So you have two major fortresses and two major Empty Tomb Heroes you want to be grabbing. So number one is Bethlehem Stable. It's kind of like the key card of the deck. Protection from hand deck and reserve shenanigans, the fact that you can get this out on turn one pretty consistently, that's really good in a format defined by a card like Matthew, where he needs to be able to look at your hand in order to do what he wants to do. Or, there's just random decks running around that all will want to look at your hand and mess with your hand. And having Bethlehem Stable out like invalidates a lot of cards that are heavily played. So like not only do you get hand, deck, and reserve protection really consistently on an early basis if you get this out on turn one, you get card advantage because it says each upkeep you may take a good nativity card from reserve, and you can bet that the nativity decks are playing maybe like 4 or 5 of these nativity cards in their reserve. And over the course of the game, this is like a storehouse. And not only is it a storehouse, if your nativity hero is harmed or defeated, you can reserve it instead. So if something does happen to Mary or John, you can just reserve it and then get it back the next turn. Herod's Temple is a great fortress. It protects gospel humans in your territory from harm. So yeah, maybe you do have a stable out, and it is possible for opponents to target and remove your characters in your territory, but you can just reserve them. But this provides a more secure protection if you don't want them all leaving. But the cool thing about Herod's Temple is you can activate its toss ability so that if you have like a lone hero in battle, you can start tossing evil enhancements. Nativity doesn't really leverage, it's not trying to go all in on Herod's Temple and trying to do tossing shenanigans. Nativity is more about like banding and attacking with the strong clusters of heroes. But this can come up sometimes, and it's very important to be aware of this card, especially if your defense is trying to leverage Herod's Temple. I'll talk later about the different types of defenses that I feel like work well with Nativity. So those are the two fortresses that you will probably want to be getting out early. And then John is an empty tomb hero who can reveal a good dominant from hand to toss the next evil enhancement and draw 2 cards. So imagine it's turn 1 and you're attacking with your hero. You play the Resurrection, get John, get a Bethlehem Stable out of your deck, Bandit John. In the best case scenario is you're going to be revealing a good dominant from your hand, toss the next evil enhancement, which is really good. A lot of defenses don't really play that many evil enhancements, so it's kind of almost forcing them to try and win combat. Either they have to have multiple evil enhancements, or they have to have a evil character that will block for them. And then the draw 2 is really good as well. So John may kind of look weird at first. He's purple. You're not going to be playing him as Meek, but he just fits so well with the turn 1 resurrection play, and his special ability is so good that he just makes the cut. Resurrection Revealer, you can play this off of the resurrection, but you cannot use the resurrection to ban to this character because he's an angel, and the resurrection only bans 3 anti-human heroes. So this guy's not Nativity, I know, but his territory class ability about negating opponent's neutral cards is incredibly strong. It shuts down lost souls, shuts down artifacts, shuts down sites, you name it. But the stipulation is you have to have at least 2 gospel angels. And so the deck that I'm running loves to play Gabriel. Not only is a nativity, but he has this special strong modular ability with a cannot be negated modifier attached to it. I know Gabriel says a lot of things, but just kind of think about it this way. He has 3 modes. You can take a silver gospel card from deck or discard piles, that's one mode. You can ban to a gospel hero, that's another mode. Or you can reserve an evil card from opponent's deck. So all 3 on those own are really strong, but the ability to kind of put them in a package together and get to choose whatever you attack with him, that's incredibly strong. Oh yeah, and did I also forget to mention that he negates an evil card? So again, he's playing into that strength of if opponents are playing down their evil cards, you're going to have a significant advantage. The other angel is Messianic Messenger. This guy may look unassuming, but the ability to take a good nativity card from deck when you attack with them is pretty strong. Often on turn 1, I'm like attacking with Messenger, getting one of my nativity heroes into my hand, and then playing the Resurrection on Messianic Messenger. And if I'm getting a card like Zechariah and banding to Zechariah, he's going to maybe draw me 2 cards too, so it can get out of hand really fast. Speaking of Zechariah, this card is amazing almost any turn of the game, especially on turn 1 though, because let's just think about turn 1. If you're going first and you play down all your heroes, you're probably going to have less cards in hand than the opponent. And so all your nativity cards are going to be active and doing their best mode. And so if opponent has hand advantage, you can draw 2 cards. So oftentimes with Zechariah, you're going to be trying to ask your opponent, like, okay, how many cards are in your hand? and then try to play your cards down so you can eventually get less than them, so you can attack with Zechariah and draw 2. I think one of my favorite cards of the deck is Joseph. His special ability is taking a good or neutral nativity card from deck if opponent has hand advantage, or just taking a good or neutral nativity card from reserve if they don't have hand advantage. So Joseph is really good because let's say you end up opponent having hand advantage, you attack with Joseph, you can go get Mary out of your deck and then ban to Mary. So this is like another way to get to Mary, but also another way to get to your really important nativity cards. Magi, he's kind of like Joseph, I guess, but he takes star cards from your deck. There's a lot of good nativity star cards, and he has a cannot be negated band. So it's like you either get to take something or do a band. And I hope you're seeing a theme here. This band is cannot be negated. This band is cannot be negated. This band is cannot be interrupted. This band is cannot be negated. The resurrection, when you play it, it's a dominant. You can't really negate banding on dominance. Simeon cannot be prevented. The fact that all these nativity heroes have these modifiers on them, it might not look like a big deal, but it's a big deal. Having cannot be negated on all your heroes, or cannot be interrupted, or cannot be prevented, like that comes up pretty often. Simeon, he might not look like very impressive, but he provides us like a top secret role for this deck as kind of like the glue to help your banding chains stick together in powerful ways. But honestly, after like comparing him to all the other characters in the deck, he's probably one of the weaker ones. But I still feel like he's necessary. I'll get to what he does a little bit later on. Not all nativity pilots run Shepherds of Bethlehem, but I found putting a copy in the reserve really helps your matchups where opponents are trying to like underdeck their Lost Souls and stuff. So he can play and negate Lost Souls from decks. That's his primary purpose when I play him. But he's also really good against all these defenses that are running these black and gray evil enhancements. Because if opponent has hand advantage, you enter battle with Shepherds, you can start tossing all evil enhancements. And usually they're going to be blocking with a gray or black evil character. So if they try to play a black and gray evil enhancement, that's going to get tossed. So yeah, he tosses all evil enhancements with the Brigade Knot in battle. All right, I feel like we've covered most of the nativity heroes. Here's a hero that I put in the list of core cards, and you'll notice he's from the Book of Exodus. That's not nativity. But the cool thing about Moses is not really his character, but its star ability, which allows you to shuffle any number of cards from your hand to draw an equal number. And the nativity deck is all about trying to get the best opening hand possible. And one of the ways the deck loses, if it straight up doesn't really draw its cards that it can use to get out the resurrection on turn 1. And so if you can find ways to make your deck more consistent on turn 1, that's really going to help your win percentage. And so Moses is kind of like almost the ability to take a mulligan in this deck. If you draw all your defense, for example, and you're really wanting to try and make your turn 1 as most impactful as possible, you can shuffle away your defense, try to draw into your resurrection and stuff like that. Or if you're just drawing the wrong cards at the wrong time, like for example, if you're drawing your Second Coming or Son of God on turn 1, you might not want to have those right away. And Moses, so when you draw Moses, the cool thing is you can shuffle away Moses. So I know he's like this card that doesn't really seem to do much in the deck, but if you use his star ability, he can shuffle himself back to draw a replacement card. So it's basically almost like you're reducing the size of your deck and making your deck more consistent. And for me, I feel like that's really important. It's important enough to kind of quote unquote waste a slot on this guy. Okay, moving on. Speaking of consistency pieces, the Annunciation, it's good in battle and it's good as a territory class. I would say maybe about 75% of the time I'm playing this down as a territory class on turn 1 to get the resurrection out of my deck. But it's also really nice if one of your dominants gets reserved, you can use the Annunciation to go get that later. If you don't decide to use it in your territory, let's say you have all these heroes banded together and they're attacking, it's a one-sided negate everything. Because all your cards are nativity and all their cards are not nativity. So if you play this in battle, it's just going to be like, basically like, I'm negate your stuff, my stuff still works. Although you do want to be careful if you have John in battle. This will negate John's draw ability and toss ability, so be careful about that. Angel Appears, another territory class card. Play Gospel Angel from deck if opponent has hand advantage. I've definitely played this card and have forgotten to get my hand size down before I played it. And this card does nothing if your hand doesn't really have, your hand has more cards in your hand than the opponent. Because I don't play angels in my reserve. Flight into Egypt. I love this card, man. Star ability says protect good nativity cards from harm until end of turn. That is probably the best ability on this card by far. I know you can play as an enhancement that says if opponent has hand advantage, negate and reserve an evil card. But by the time in the game where you're actually in battle and wanting to play this, you're going to have more cards in hand than the opponent. But the big idea is if you can try and get multiple star abilities off Flight into Egypt, and then attack with all your heroes that are like protected and banding to each other, like that's a really strong attack. Magnificat, this card usually sits in the reserve and is gotten out by a stable. So this is interrupt the battle, reserve all evil characters in battle. This card is straight up busted if you're running gospel offenses. The fact that you can interrupt the battle, interrupt whatever's going on, and then do the reserve is really good. And the little cannot be prevented if used by Mary, that's icing on the cake. And its star ability is kind of relevant too, and I'll show you why. After we talk about Last Child Found, that is, if used by Nativity Hero, this is like another one of those, you interrupt the battle winners. Interrupt the battle, bounce up to 3 other cards except dominance. So not only is this fantastic in combat, but the fact that you can play as a territory class and start bouncing their fortresses or their heroes or their evil characters, it's really flexible. There's quite no other card in the game that does what this card does, and it's played in a lot of different decks for great reason. I could spend a whole video talking about what this card can do, but suffice it to say that this card is one of the all-stars in this deck for sure, especially with its star ability. Good Seed, it's a 4-color enhancement. 4 colors is kind of a bad thing to have right now because of Matthew running around, but I feel like the power of this card is worth the risk of having a card with 4 different brigades in your hand. They attack you with Matthew. But anyways, it's a territory class enhancement that says each upkeep, you can take a good enhancement from reserve. So you can just put it down and slowly accrue resources over the game. Or it says while evil characters in battle, you may reserve this card to add your anti-human hero to battle. So if your battle is going sideways, and let's say maybe they remove all your heroes from battle, or it looks like they're about to just slam the door on you, you can reserve your Good Seed to add your hero to battle. So it has to be a human hero, but one of your best heroes to add to battle is Gabriel. So the sneaky way to do that is if you have a Magi or a Simeon out, you can use Good Seed to add your Magi or Simeon, and they can band to Gabriel. And adding Gabriel in to negate a battle-winning card is really strong. Remember, you can't really use Good Seed in Special Initiative, but after maybe they've played their enhancement and they've killed all your heroes, you can use Good Seed to add Simeon to Gabriel, and then that can do the negate. Or if you know they only have 1 enhancement in their hand, you can use Good Seed, add John, do the toss ability. So Good Seed really flexible. And the busted thing about this card is you can get it back multiple times over the course of the game if you're running New Covenant. It's an artifact that when you activate it, you can take a good gospel enhancement from deck or reserve. So you know how Good Seed reserves itself? Well, just get it back next turn, play it down, attack again, rinse and repeat. So in theory, it's like this loop that's really powerful. Virgin Birth, this card is a mainstay in most decks you'll see these days. But star ability says looks at the top 6 cards of deck. You may underdeck this card to take 1. So if you draw this card in your opening hand, you can really smooth out your draws and get the best card in your top 6 to help you, try to pop off that turn. So it's just a consistency piece that just helps keep the deck running smoothly. Child is Born, you can see this card is typically played in the reserve and gotten off Bethlehem stable, but it's a powerful interrupt the battle ability that you can take a nativity hero from your reserve. So usually nativity decks will be having 1 or 2 nativity cards in the reserve just so they can leverage the full power of this card. And then you can do hero may band any number of anti-heroes. So all the cards that I just said, like all those nativity heroes that I showed you, a lot of them generate resources by themselves. So if you're able to attack, with a few nativity heroes, then play Child is Born and band in all your heroes and they trigger their abilities, you can see this kind of snowball effect of how the game can quickly get out of control for the opponent if you're attacking with multiple heroes and all the heroes are doing their abilities and you can't negate it. So I love this card. Here is a signature card of the Nativity deck. Let me try to break it down for you for those who don't really know what this card does or how it looks. Maybe it looks confusing. So, okay, sorry about that. Anyways, so there's it's going to be referencing this variable x. X is going to be the number of nativity heroes you have in play, and it has a limit, hard limit at 6. Basically, star ability is you can draw up to X cards. So if you happen to draw this card beginning of your turn, while you have a bunch of nativity heroes out, you can draw a bunch of cards. So that's really cool. But the dominant effect of this, it says you may reveal discard pile and up to X cards from hand. Activate up to X good star abilities on those cards and or cards you control. So what does that mean? Basically, you look at your discard pile, you look at your hand, you look at what you have in play, and then you get to choose that many X star abilities to activate on all those cards. So let's say you have 5 nativity heroes in play, and you look around in your discard pile, you look around in your hand, and you look around in play, and you count up. I was like, oh, I want to activate these 5 different star abilities. And you can activate them all at the speed of a dominant. So just to give you kind of typical understanding of what that might look like, let's say you have a giant hero banding chain and you're attacking. Maybe the opponent chooses to block and they're like, can I play evil enhancement? And you're like, no, because I'm going to play Star Bethlehem, activate 5 different star abilities. One of them is going to be Flight into Egypt, protect good nativity cards from harm. The other is the Annunciation. I get to look at your hand. Shop found, I can play Lost Soul from your deck. Magnificat, I will discard an evil card from your reserve. And for 5, let's choose Star Bethlehem because this card is in play when you play it. Believe it or not, you can actually choose its own star ability when you play Star Bethlehem. So you can draw 5 cards, protect your good nativity heroes from harm, play Lost Soul from a deck. That's just busted. But the thing, in order to get this card to work, you have to have the heroes out. You have to have the star cards in your hand or discard pile. So this is typically not a card you're going to be wanting to play on turn 1 unless you really have a bunch of resources out already. This is more like maybe turn 2, 3, or 4 card. But what a powerful card it is. Okay, quickly moving on to the rest of finishing up the rest of these core cards. We have Crowd's Choice. It's another glue piece that increases the consistency of the deck. So if you have this in your hand turn 1, you know exactly what to do. You can go grab the Resurrection or, Messianic Messenger or whoever you need to get the final pieces of the puzzle down. Glory of the Lord, this is a newcomer to the scene, but imagine that scenario where you're attacking with all these protected nativity guards or whatever. You're just attacking with a giant banding chain and they decide to block with somebody. Maybe they have an enhancement in their hand that's going to be able to take out all your heroes. If you kind of suspect that, you can play this before they get to play evil enhancements and stop them from playing evil enhancements. And notably, significantly, Zechariah is a priest. So if you're attacking with Zechariah by himself and you play Glory of the Lord, he's going to have the agency to play all these good enhancements, and the opponent probably won't have that same luxury. Okay, one last card I would like to talk about or mention is a Coming Prince. It's a territory class enhancement that you can play it to top deck a good star card from your discard pile. So if you remember Star Bethlehem, that happens to be a star card. And the most common thing you're going to be doing with this card is putting Star Bethlehem back on top of your deck. So that's just really good. Now notice this has that limit twice per game thing is because Coming Prince exists. And I guess people in playtesting were abusing that. So they had to put a limit twice per game. Okay, and you have your standard 3 woes and Second Coming. They're in all redemption decks ever. It's really flexible pieces. I don't think I'll go into much talk about them. And Son of God, of course, this is the nativity version of Son of God. This is a promo version that is actually technically a nativity card. So while you don't have to play this if you're running nativity, it's pretty encouraged because if that happens to get reserved, you can use your Bethlehem stable to go get that out of your reserve. Whew. Okay, so wow, that was a lot of talking just for the high level concepts of the deck and the cards. Now let's get into kind of their strengths of nativity. So like I said, it has some really good turn 1s, or at least it can. The ability to get out Bethlehem Stable or Heritage Temple on turn 1, along with 4 or 5 good heroes that all can draw cards and get you card advantage. That's really strong. The fact that it can get hand protection down early, that's also really strong. That's a big deal. The fact that a lot of its characters can draw cards or get other cards, that's also really big for wanting to keep your deck competitive. So it has decent card velocity, I would say, but perhaps not as much as other decks who are kind of going more all in on drawing cards with their heroes. But if there's like a spectrum and it's like that, it's not like the 90th percentile, but maybe like 80 percentile of good offenses that draw cards. The fact that a lot of its heroes have that cannot be negated modifier on them is also very significant. With the advent of roots, there's been this card called Holy of Holies, which has seen a resurgence, or sorry, not a resurgence, but has come onto the scene as a strong strategy that's trying to negate characters in battle. And one of the weaknesses of those other Gospel of Christ strategies that are always trying to draw cards with their characters, a lot of those cards have the can be negated by Holy of Holies. So this card has seen resurgence. This card has seen play to try and counter those type of decks. And so the cool thing about Nativity is you're kind of totally sidestepping people's ways of trying to deal with the other strong strategies out there. Nativity is also a very resilient deck. It's hard to kill. It's hard to kill all the Nativity heroes, especially with Bethlehem Stable out. They're going to need to have a lot of different cards in order to really deal with all the different angles of attacks Nativity can throw at you. The fact that all your Nativity heroes can band to each other and then you have like ability to give them all protection, that's a big strength. And not a lot of defenses are equipped to deal with that. And yeah, overall the strategy is really powerful. It's what it's trying to do. It's good at drawing cards, good at playing stuff out, and it's consistent in doing all that. Let's talk about some of the weaknesses the deck has. Okay, so number one I put up there. This is in not any particular order, but I just was just a list of cards or strategies that I felt like Nativity struggles with in general. One of them is called Soul Hiding. Cards like Just a Hireling allow you to shuffle lost souls into your deck. And so if I'm attacking with the giant big protected Nativity banding chain, and you block with your little derpy Pharisee or Sadducee, and you play this card, I'm left with all these great enhancements in my hand that can interrupt the battle and win the battle, but you're not giving me the chance to play those cards. You're just dying, you're playing this card, you're dying, and there's no lost souls left in play. And so that's a big deal, and that's a big weakness of this type of deck. And so that's why you see me trying to incorporate cards like Glory of the Lord, which restrict characters from trying to play these cards. So that's one weakness of the deck that good Nativity players will try to build their decks in a way to try and mitigate that weakness of soul hiding. Kind of in a similar vein of soul hiding are cards like this Contagious Fear, which protect souls from rescue. Same idea as if they block with their little tiny evil character and they get initiative and play a card. It can be a card that can protect lost souls from rescue, and this deck doesn't really have good ways to deal with that. Next in line is Search Punishers, cards that are effective at limiting or restricting or giving me bad consequences if I want to search my deck. A lot of the Nativity cards, what they love to do is search deck, search reserve, blah, blah, blah. And I've had games where people activate Wasting Disease and they dare me to search. And believe it or not, if I'm searching 3 or 4 times in a turn while this card's out, they're just going to pick apart my territory and it's not going to be fun. So cards like Wasting Disease, cards like, if the Nativity pilot isn't careful, cards like Sheol can really mess with us. So, okay, so let's say you're in battle with your Nativity heroes. They're all banded to each other and you think you're golden because you have interrupt the battles if anything goes wrong. And then the opponent blocks with their brown evil character and plays Reap the Whirlwind, and you're just like, uh-oh. Shuffle all heroes in battle, cannot be negated if more than one hero is in battle. So there's a lot of these different types of effects, right? There's this, there's abandonment, there's scattered sheep. You know, every defense that wants to play an effect like this has access to that. And this is a strong effect, and most defenses are running that. So again, like the ability to be able to toss enhancements in battle, restrict people from doing them, and also the ability to give your guys protection with Flight into Egypt, that's significant against these types of cards. All right, another character that I think mentions naming is Goliath, and it's good. Goliath's really good because number one, that cannot be negated. But what he does is if you're attacking with your giant protected, sorry, not protected, but giant banding chain, and the opponent blocks with Goliath, he gets to push that banding chain out of battle, and you get to present a new hero. And normally that's not much of an issue, but the thing is, this deck plays Herod's Temple and Bethlehem Stable, and if you don't have any other heroes in your territory, and maybe like, for example, they're in your hand, because of Bethlehem Stable, your hand's actually protected from Goliath's like ability. So he's going to push you out of battle, and you're not going to be able to put a character into battle from your hand. Or if you have Herod's Temple out and you have a bunch of heroes in your territory, they're protected. So Goliath's going to push your heroes out, and you can't present from territory. So experienced Nativity players will actually leave angels in their territory when they have Bethlehem Stable or Here's Temple out to try and hedge around a Goliath block. Gabriel, if you have Gabriel, leaving Gabriel in your territory is really smart. It's because if they block you with Goliath, you can withdraw all your heroes and then put Gabriel in, and then Gabriel can like ban to whoever, you know. All this to say, Goliath can be a problem for this deck. Another card that can give this deck headaches is Outsiders. This deck is all about getting on board early, getting that board advantage. And this is a card that when an opponent is behind, they can use it to catch up really in an impactful way. This deck plays a lot of good brigades on its offense. It has Zechariah, has Gabriel, has good seed. And if they play Outsiders, its X can be like up to 7 on, I think. And they get to draw 7 cards or underdeck, 7 cards or any combination of the both of those. So Outsiders, I've been beat a lot with this card in my nativity testing. This is definitely a card to watch out for. It's good to have the 3 woes in your hand when you're attacking, just in case they do the Outsiders. Yeah, this card can just wreck nativity. So another weakness of nativity is New Testament banding. What do I mean by that? If your opponent is also playing a New Testament-based offense and they play a card like the Resurrection or Hospitality in Bethany, they get to have access to all your heroes. And so imagine you're trying to block, and now all of a sudden you're getting attacked with your own heroes. There's a lot of these cards that can ban anti-heroes running around, with the Resurrection being the most prominent. But like, if you're being attacked with your own Mary, and they have the Unity requirement, just getting attacked with your own Mary is no fun. Especially because they can convert Mary to Meek, and you don't really have good tools to turn Mary back to not Meek. So anyways, stalemate cards are like cards like Unsuccessful that end the battle in stalemate. It's like the Soul Hiding, it's like the Soul Protection, but falls under the category of enhancements that don't give me initiative that end the battle in some way. So cards like Unsuccessful and Feudal Inquisition are the most commonly played ones. Okay, Foreign Wives is another card that is a named concern for me. A lot of decks draw cards, and Foreign Wives is the cannot be negated way to block those decks. And so cards like Zechariah, cards like John, I'm attacking often with these cards. And if opponent blocks with Foreign Wives, then I don't really have ways to get around that. I don't have, regardless of protection, anything, And so I'm always kind of in the back of my mind trying to figure out like, oh, do I think they have Foreign Wives? Is there any way I can try to attack them this turn that will make it so I don't draw 5 cards on my turn? Can I try and draw my cards after they block? Stuff like that. It's the best feeling in the world when you have a giant banding chain of heroes. They're all protected from harm, and they're coming into battle. Your opponent blocks, and you think, what could they possibly have? The best feeling in the world, let me tell you, is when they play Grapes of Wrath, discard the evil character, and they shuffle all your heroes away. That's the best feeling, because turns out that definition of harm on Flight into Egypt, that's only applying to neutral and evil abilities. It's not applying to good ones. So Grapes of Wrath is a good ability that's basically used to stop large banding chains or whatever. This card is problematic. If opponent is playing it, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get blown out by it. So be warned. All right, I would like to dedicate this whole section of the video to tips and tricks with Nativity. These are tips and tricks that were compiled by me and a couple other people, and we have a Nativity Discord. So shout out to Augur the Wise and Demon Hunter. We all came up with these tips, and I'm just going to be throwing them out there, and if it's okay if they don't stick. This is meant for maybe once you've gotten a couple reps with the deck, this is just good information to have and to be aware of. All right, so if you get locked out of Lost Souls by opponent's sites, let's say they have some sites and they put all their sites on their Lost Souls, Mary can actually get you out of that because you can attack with Mary, negate, and reserve their site, and all of a sudden, you have access to that Lost Soul again. If you are desperate to draw your Son of God on a turn, you can activate Herod's Temple, maybe when you're blocking or whatever, try and reserve cards off the top of your deck in the hopes that one of them will be Son of God. Because on your upkeep, you can use Bethlehem Stable to go get that. So this effectively can dig the top 4 cards of your deck for Son of God. This is a tip that I probably don't recommend doing, because if they have a way to get rid of your stable, your Son of God is going to be stranded in your reserve. So if you're trying to set up for a big turn attacking with John the Forerunner, and you want to try and get as least cards in your hand as possible, during your discard phase of the previous turn, you can actually discard any number of cards from your hand. You don't have to discard down to 8. You can discard, in theory, you could discard your whole hand. So keep that in mind. I've done that before, where I'm just trying to get that lost soul, and they have evil character with like two power, and I want to try and paralyze him. So let's say you've played a card called The Child is Born, and you're banding heroes into battle. The best thing to do is activate heroes that have that hand advantage thing before you have cards that draw you cards. What do I mean by that? So Joseph, if you want to take a good nativity card from your deck, you're probably going to want to activate Joseph before you activate John. Does that make sense? Because John draws you 2 cards. By the time you get to Joseph, you might not even have that hand advantage anymore, or hand disadvantage, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so back to Mary. Mary can negate and reserve an evil card in any territory. This includes your territory. So if they have evil cards sitting in your territory, Mary can just go ahead and get rid of those for you. So cards like there's a lot of placed orange cards around, or there's a popular strategy called the Fools. And the Fools, their star abilities, they get put in your territory, and an opponent chooses them to block, and you're screwed. But so if you have Fools running around in your territory, Mary can help clean them up for you, in theory. Okay, so another thing about Mary is her take a star card from reserve. She can take a star card of any alignment. So she can take your good star cards, but yeah, she can also take your evil ones. So if you're attacking with Mary and you feel pretty good about your offense, you can go grab an evil star card to help your defense block the next turn. And another Mary trick, you can use her to negate a lost soul. So lost souls are neutral cards. Mary can target a lost soul with this ability. She's not going to be able to reserve that lost soul, but she can negate it. So if there's a lost soul that's giving you trouble, Mary can be used to temporarily negate it during the battle phase. At least I think this is the case. I'm pretty sure I asked this once in a Ruling Question channel, and that's the answer I remember getting. But if I'm wrong, I'm sure someone in the comments will correct me. A common scenario is opponent's going to be having evil 3 woes in play. Negating is trying to negate your stable or whatever. Mary can negate and reserve their 3 woes. That comes up all the time. So if an opponent bans to Mary and has the unity and converts her to Meek, that might seem like the end of the world. But you have a couple ways around that. You have Lost Child Found, which you can use to bounce Mary, or some decks like to run the Temple Veil, which can also bounce Mary back to your hand. Resurrection is cool. You can play Empty Tomb Hero and Fortress from your discard pile. So let's say maybe it's later in the game and you actually get your Resurrection pop-off going. If opponent maybe shipwrecked your stable and killed your Resurrection Revealer, you can use the Resurrection to get both of them back from your discard and put them into play. So the limitation with this card is you have to get the Fortress and the Hero from the same location. So either get them out of your deck or out of your discard pile. The discard pile doesn't come up that often, but it can happen. If you're ever into a battle with a lone nativity hero like Joseph, don't forget about Herod's Temple. Or I had a scenario the other day where I was attacking with Joseph and Mary. Mary got killed, and then Joseph was left in battle. So then I activated Herod's Temple, and then I tossed, Child is Born at their character. And I got the easy rescue, sorry. If you're ever, again, in that scenario where you actually want to attack with a lone hero, if you happen to have Mary plus any like 4-star enhancement in your hand, like Flight into Egypt or Magnificat, and a Child is Born, that will kind of get a free rescue against any sort of single character trying to block you, because most evil characters in the game won't have anything more than 11 toughness. So the idea is you attack with Mary, they block with your evil character, you activate Herod's Temple, now you're in a toss battle. Mary's really weak, so you don't want to give him initiative, so maybe you toss a 4-power card at them, and then you toss the 7, and there's nothing they can do. So Mary attacking by herself is often a very strong attack if you kind of have large tossing enhancements. So remember how I said Coming Prince can be used to go get the Star of Bethlehem, but it can also be used to get other star abilities too. So for example, maybe use it to go get something from your discard pile, go to get the Annunciation. You can use the Annunciation to take a good dominant. So let's say you're like trying to find your Son of God or whatever. That's a way to do it. Let's say you have a bunch of dominants that get reserved from your deck and you're like trying to figure out how to get them back. Well, one way to do that is attacking with Gabriel. you can search your discard pile for a silver enhancement, get that Annunciation, use the Annunciation to go get your dominance back. Gabriel attacking with him on turn 1 and reserving an evil card out of the opponent's deck is really strong, and then playing like the Resurrection on Gabriel. But he can also go and attack and grab Resurrection Revealer if you're really concerned that the matchup you really want to have that negate neutral, because Gabriel can take a Silver Gospel card from your deck. When you're playing 3 woes, it's you're almost always going to have it on playing it as evil and negating their good cards. The reason I say this is because you already have a built-in way to negate and reserve problematic evil cards. What you don't have are ways to negate their offensive good cards. And there's a lot of them running around, like Herod's Temple, all these good heroes running around. So I don't know. A good rule of thumb is if you're in doubt about when and where and what type of woes you should play, you should always try to maybe negate their good cards. Unless you're in the Nativity mirror match and you're worried about they have a Mary, but even then it's still probably worth it. If you're planning on doing a Star of Bethlehem or Resurrection or Glory of the Lord in battle, an opponent is like asking you for dominant initiative, be aware of a line that they can do is they can play Harvest Time, go get Lost Souls out of their decks, and then they can go get Complacent, which restricts dominance. So that'll prevent you from playing your enhancements, or sorry, your dominance during battle. So yes, this does come up, and I think my friend Augur, he did lose a game because of this. So he's just telling us this as something to be aware of. So if you use 20 shekels to look at their hand and you see they have 2 enhancements that are going to really cause you trouble if they give you initiative, what you can do is attack with Zechariah, prevent the next enhancement, then use Good Seed when they block, and after they play their first enhancement, use Good Seed and add John to battle, toss the next, so you can effectively deal with 2 different enhancements. So Bethlehem Stable only protects your Nativity heroes from harm or defeat by opponent. What it doesn't stop your Nativity heroes dying from is like toss battles. So if you activate your Herod's Temple and you're trying to, engage in a toss battle and your hero dies, the source of the harm isn't an opponent, nor is an evil card. It's your Herod's Temple. Or for example, you attack with John and somehow you have John and Mary in the battle and they want to toss the next evil enhancement. Let's say they toss a 3 power card at Mary. You're not going to be able to reserve Mary off of stables because the source of the toss is John. You control John. He's a good card. So that doesn't meet the requirements of stable. So be careful with tossing and your Nativity heroes. If opponent does decide to block with Goliath and you don't really have any other ways of putting heroes back into battle, keep in mind that Shepherds is generic. Resurrection Reveal is also generic. If Goliath is kicking them out because they're generic, they can enter the battle. They can enter battle 2nd time. Whereas unique heroes like John or Zechariah, they can only enter battle once per turn. But the Resurrection Revealer and Shepherds, they don't have that restriction. So if you're worried about Goliath blocking, maybe attack with your Shepherds or whatever, and he can come back. If you're suspecting the opponent is going to be playing the Resurrection on turn 1, maybe it's a good idea to keep some heroes in your opening hand. Like if you have the option to play your Mary down, just to try and get cards down in your hand, maybe it would be better for you to actually hold on to Mary so they can't ban to it. If you're also worried about people banning to you, you can in theory use Lost Child Found, bounce heroes to your own hand. Maybe you really want to bounce something the opponent has and you're thinking about, okay, what do I want to bounce for the rest of the 3 other cards? Well, when in doubt, maybe bounce your own heroes so the opponent can't ban to them. At the beginning of the game, you will often draw cards like the Annunciation or Lost Child Found, and you can use their star abilities. Use these abilities to really scout out what the opponent's doing. Lost Child Found is nice because you get to see their entire deck. And when you're looking through their deck, maybe take a note of like what kind of dominance they have and what kind of cards they can use to block your Nativity cards. You only get 30 seconds to do that, so it's going to take a sharp mind to really get to leverage the ability of getting to see all that information. So some helpful pointers for when you get to do this. First, check kind of what theme they're doing, what their offense general strategy is, their general defense. Check and count the number of dominants left in their deck. Check for Son of God, Second Coming, 3 woes. And if you don't see any of those, you can probably assume that they have those in their hand. And look out for any cards that you know are going to cause you problems like Foreign Wives or Firefoxes. If you're worried about Foreign Wives blocking and the fact that she'd be protected, maybe save your Star of Bethlehem drawing until after they block. If you're worried about them blocking and destroying your heroes with Goliath, maybe playing Star Bethlehem before they block is what you want to do. So it really is conditional. Sometimes you really want to give them protection before the opponent blocks, but sometimes you really want to draw cards after they block. If you're ever worried opponent has a Glory of the Lord that they're going to try to use to shut you out of the game, you can attack with Zechariah by himself, and he can get around their Glory of the Lord. Or if they ever decide to Glory of the Lord you, and they think they're going to win the battle, you can use Good Seed to add another hero to battle, which oftentimes you can ban. And so you can often turn the tides in your favor when you do that. If the opponent manages to underdeck all their Lost Souls before you can defeat them in battle, you can play Star Bethlehem before the battle's over to activate Lost Child Found, which plays Lost Soul from the deck to actually continue the rescue. If you ever end up with Moses or Virgin Birth in your hand, kind of stuck there, you can use Star Bethlehem to activate their star abilities. And for Virgin Birth, you get to activate star ability, send it to the bottom of your deck, and take a card from the top of your deck. In Moses, you can, do its shuffle ability, which is really nice. Whew, that was a lot of tips and tricks. I have a whole section of the video dedicated to Star Bethlehem. This is basically like tips and tricks continued, but this time just for Star Bethlehem, because this has a lot of nuances of when you want to play Star. I kind of talked about that a few seconds ago, but I want to continue that. So let's say you're trying to have the biggest pop-off you're trying to have the biggest pop-off turn ever with Nativity, and you want to give your heroes protection before they go into battle. A trick that I'll like to do is I'll like to play Star Bethlehem before I attack, have the Magnificat in my hand, and use its star ability to, use its star ability to snipe a Foreign Wives that is probably sitting in their reserve. So if I'm suspecting that they have a Foreign Wives in their reserve, turn 2, I can go Bethlehem Stable, go get Magnificat out of my reserve, and then use Star Bethlehem, use the Magnificat. Or here's another way you can sequence that. You can attack with Mary, get a star card from your reserve, get the Magnificat, then use Star Bethlehem, use the Magnificat star ability to snipe the Foreign Wives. Let's say you don't have Flight into Egypt, or you don't have Star Bethlehem, but maybe you have like one of those pieces. What you can do is you can get your hand size down, do a big giant banding chain, and then band in Joseph or the Magi. If you have hand disadvantage, you can use Magi or Joseph to get Star Bethlehem out of your deck, or Flight into Egypt, because those are both good Nativity cards. Those are both good star cards. And if you're going crazy, what you can do, you can use the Resurrection, band Joseph and Magi. Oh yeah, I should also say, if you happen to ban a Messianic Messenger, you can also get the Star or Flight. But anyways, the idea is if you have none of those card combo pieces in your hand, you can use band in Joseph, band in Magi. In theory, you can grab Flight and Star out of your deck and then play them right before the opponent blocks. I've done that before, it's really strong. Oh yeah, so when you're going off with Star Bethlehem, and you have either John the Forerunner or John the Fisherman in play, you will oftentimes want to trigger his star ability, but here's the way you do it. You trigger their star ability first, put something on top of your deck, then you trigger Star Bethlehem to draw X cards. And so you get to know the first card that you draw is going to be that dominant. So that's really strong. And especially if you pair that with Crouch Choice, now you have access to any card in your deck. On the turns that you want a Coming Prince back into Star Bethlehem, what you can do is you can play Coming Prince as a territory class, put Star Bethlehem back on top of your deck, and then either use cards like Zechariah to draw cards, or Joseph, or Messianic Messenger, or Magi to get the Star Bethlehem out of your deck and play it again. So you don't have to wait a turn after you place this on top of your deck. Although sometimes that might be what you want to do to draw more cards. But if you're already playing Star Bethlehem once to draw like 4 cards, and then playing Coming Prince again to put it back on top of your deck, like you probably just want the velocity of playing it the turn you do that, instead of like waiting to star card and then playing it again. You don't need to draw 8 cards, like 4 cards would probably be just fine or whatever. Some people like running Flight into Egypt in the reserve, and that's decent because you can go Bethlehem Stable or Mary, consistently get it on turn 2. But I like having this card in my opening hand, get really strong turn 1 attacks, and also the fact that Messianic Messenger, Joseph, or the Magi can get it out of my deck. It's really nice. I don't know. I can see it going either way, though. Okay, let's talk about defense just for a little bit. Now that you've kind of have a maybe better grasp on the Nativity offense, like what about the defense? I would say the defense is mostly limited by what kind of dominance you can play. What do I mean by that? Well, going back to the deck, guess what? You have your second coming, that's one. Three woes, two. Cross choice, three. Star of Bethlehem, four. Resurrection, five. Son of God, six. Glory of the Lord, seven. Those are, I feel like you need all those decks, all those dominants for this deck. Like, I don't feel like the deck would be as powerful if you cut any one of those. And so if you're playing a defense that needs a bunch of evil dominance to work, like, for example, if you're playing a Soulhide defense, you probably need Burial. If you're playing a Philistine defense, you probably will want to be playing a Warrior Overtaken. I mean, I can't really think of, oh wait, yeah. If you're playing a deck that needs to attack fortresses, you're playing a defense that really needs to like look at their hand and get rid of their storehouses and stuff like that. Yeah, there's really no room for Shipwreck in this deck, you know? So when you're choosing a defense for the deck, kind of keep in mind that restriction there. I would say that's the primary restriction is play a defense that doesn't really need these dominance play these defensive dominance to actually get the blocks. And the cool thing about Glory of the Lord though is that it pairs well on offense or defense. So this can be a defensive dominant if you need it to be, if you build your deck right. Okay, for example, here's a defense that I liked pairing with Nativity. It's a Herod defense. And Herods are really good, number one, because they really take advantage of Herod's Temple. And this deck can get Herod's Temple out pretty consistently. So having any sort of gospel-based defense is already a great start. Number two, they don't nearly need dominance to help them block. So that's what I'd say Herod's is a great resource. Also, like there's an incidental thing with Herodias that she can restrict reserves. And if opponents are playing a lot of answers to Nativity in the reserve, you know, like Foreign Wives, for example, Herodias can help your Nativity break through incidentally. Let's talk about, here's the other version of the deck that's seen play right now. It's the newspaper version popularized by Augur the Wise. It's a black and gray base defense using some of the best black and gray cards. This is another way you can build the deck. Strong blocks, they don't need dominance. They work well with Herod's Temple. And yeah, just solid cards overall. All right, I feel like we're nearing the end of the video here, but let's talk about some other deck building considerations. Okay, so this guy, I don't know if he's actually part of the core. You know, it's debatable if the pros of this guy outweigh the cons. You know, I wouldn't say like this guy's core of the Nativity deck. It's just a card worth considering to help to make your turn ones more consistent. All right, so there's this combo running around where people are playing Heavenly Host, putting Heavenly Host in their Chamber of Angels, and you can do this 4 times, create 4 Heavenly Host tokens. And so when they do that, they can then play their Star of Bethlehem and guarantee like X equals 6. So that's like another way you can build the deck if you want to try and do more card velocity, but personally feel like you can't really get those 2 cards together consistently enough to actually make that payoff worth it. And that's like 2 different slots in your deck. Having Chamber is nice though, I will admit, if you want to protect your Resurrection Revealer. So there's another school of thought that doesn't really play the 20 shekels way. They like to play Temple Veil instead. The reason they want to do this is because 20 shekels requires an active artifact slot, where this one you can activate it on your Herod's Temple. And so I would advise that strategy if you're trying to put important artifacts on the stack, or if you're not really running John the Forerunner. But I would say overall, in my opinion, that 20 shekels is probably the stronger option of the 2. I feel like there's a version of the deck that kind of goes more heavy into the banding. It plays cards like Hospitality and Bethany. I've seen one even play the Ascension in the reserve because like you can attack with Mary Converter to Clay, grab the Ascension, and just do more of like this type of effect. And if you're playing Magnifying Multitudes, putting more cards and characters into your deck that do stuff when they're banded into battles seems like a solid strategy, but ultimately I feel like that's weaker. It makes you more vulnerable to those scattered effects. A cool card you can do is Banner of Love. You can attack with Mary, play Banner of Love, band in John the Fisherman. He tosses next, and they're put in special initiative. It's a really strong attack, but honestly, I feel like White already has enough good battle winners that you don't need this card. If you're not playing Shepherds, then I'd recommend have some sort of form of soul generation. Lost Souls is an easy way to do that. Card that I've really been loving in my Nativity builds is the Cross. Not only does it toss all those evil enhancements like scattered and scattered sheep and abandonment and stuff like that. You're not playing enhancements with the word negated in them, so it's kind of like a one-sided bad effect for them. And the fact that it restricts dominance really shuts down some of their best blocks, like Burial or Grapes of Wrath, and just cards that can mess you up in combat. Great White Throne is a card that you might want to consider. It's a great way to keep getting Nativity heroes out of your deck. So if you have a defense that can get evil cards and you just crap out early, you might want to consider adding this. And oh my goodness, it's been over an hour and 20 minutes since I started recording this, but I'll believe it or not, I'm out of things to say. If you would like to watch videos about Nativity gameplay, I just recently came out with a couple of videos that talk about these playtesting sessions where I'm playing Nativity and I'm also playing the opponent's deck. And in those games, I get to kind of take all this that you've learned and I apply that to games in Nativity. So if you're interested, feel free to check out those videos. I think I'll also link a playlist to all the Nativity gameplay I've ever done in the description. So check it out. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You guys are crazy if you've made it this far talking about Nativity. You guys must be really devoted Nativity fans. All right, see you in the next video.